The autumn wind howled through the narrow streets of Cripple Creek, carrying with it the acrid smell of sulphur from the mines and the promise of an early winter. Silas Blackwood stood at the second-story window of his office above the First National Bank, his steel-grey eyes surveying the bustling mining town he had helped build and now controlled with an iron fist. At 42, Blackwood possessed the kind of commanding presence that made lesser men step aside. His black hair, streaked with premature silver at the temples, was always perfectly groomed, despite the dusty chaos of the mining camps. His expensive Eastern suits, tailored in Denver and shipped by rail, set him apart from the grimy prospectors and weathered ranchers who populated the town. But it was his eyes that truly marked him as dangerous, cold, calculating, and utterly without mercy when crossed. "Mr. Blackwood, sir." His foreman, Dutch Henderson, knocked hesitantly at the office door. "The new seamstress is downstairs, says she has an appointment." Blackwood didn't turn from the window. For 3 weeks, he had been hearing whispers about the Frenchwoman who had rented the small shop on Bennett Avenue. Elena Moreau, they called her. The miners' wives spoke of her delicate hands and refined mannerisms, so different from the rough frontier women they were accustomed to. More intriguingly, she had politely but firmly declined every social invitation, maintaining an air of mysterious dignity that only fueled the town's curiosity and Blackwood's interest. "Send her up." His voice carried the authority of a man who had never been denied anything he truly wanted. Minutes later, Elena Moreau entered his office, and Blackwood felt something shift in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. She was perhaps 25, with lustrous dark hair pulled back in an elegant chignon that revealed the graceful line of her neck. Her dress, while simple black wool, appropriate for a working woman, was cut with a sophistication that spoke of European influence, but it was her bearing that captivated him most, the way she held herself with quiet dignity, her dark eyes meeting his, without the usual mixture of fear and avarice he was accustomed to seeing. "Miss Moreau." He gestured to the leather chair across from his mahogany desk. "Please sit. I understand you're seeking to establish your business here." "Indeed, Mr. Blackwood." Her voice carried a slight accent, French, as advertised, but with something else underneath that he couldn't quite place. "I've heard you as a man who can make things happen in this town." Blackwood smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "That's true enough, but I'm curious. What brings a lady of your obvious refinement to a place like Cripple Creek? Surely the drawing rooms of Paris or New York would be more suitable." For just an instant, something flickered across her features, too quickly for him to identify, but enough to sharpen his interest. "Sometimes, monsieur, one must go where the opportunity calls. I am skilled seamstress. The mining boom, it brings many wives who need proper clothes, no?" "Indeed it does." Blackwood leaned back in his chair, studying her openly. "And what exactly do you need from me?" "The building I rent, it has problems with the roof. The landlord, he says you own the mortgage. I need proper workspace, or I cannot serve the ladies properly." Blackwood nodded slowly. He did indeed own the mortgage on half the buildings on Bennett Avenue, a fact that gave him considerable leverage over the town's merchants. "The repairs can be arranged, for a consideration, of course." Her chin lifted slightly. "I can pay fair price, Mr. Blackwood." "I'm sure you can." He rose from his chair and moved around the desk, noting how she tensed almost imperceptibly at his approach. Interesting. Most women in town either cowered before him or threw themselves at his wealth and power. Elena Moreau seemed determined to do neither. "But I had something else in mind. You're new to town, Miss Moreau. You must be lonely. I'd be honored to escort you to the harvest dance this Saturday evening." The refusal was immediate and polite. "I am flattered, monsieur, but I must decline. I have much work to complete." Blackwood felt his jaw tighten. He wasn't accustomed to rejection, particularly from women who depended on his goodwill for their livelihood. "Perhaps you didn't understand. In a town like this, it's important to have the right connections." Eleanor rose gracefully, smoothing her skirts. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Blackwood, but my answer remains the same. If you cannot help with the roof repairs without conditions, I will find another solution." The audacity of it struck him silent for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he found himself laughing, a genuine sound of surprised admiration. "You have spirit, Miss Moreau. I respect that." He returned to his desk, pulling out a sheet of company letterhead. "Very well. The repairs will be completed by week's end, no strings attached. Consider it a welcome gift to our community." "Merci beaucoup." She inclined her head gracefully. "You are most generous." As she turned to leave, Blackwood called after her. "Miss Moreau?" My offer for Saturday evening stands. Should you reconsider? She paused at the door, her hand on the brass knob. I think not, monsieur, but I thank you for the invitation. After she left, Blackwood stood once again at his window, watching her figure disappear into the afternoon crowd. Dutch Henderson appeared in the doorway, his weathered face creased with concern. Boss, you sure about giving her them repairs for free? Folks might get ideas about you going soft. Blackwood's reflection in the glass showed a smile that would have chilled lesser men. Soft? No, Dutch. Sometimes you have to invest in what you want before you can truly possess it. Miss Elena Moreau has just become my newest project. Outside, the wind grew colder, and the first snowflakes of winter began to fall on the streets of Cripple Creek, as if nature itself was warning of the storm to come. 3 weeks had passed since Elena's first encounter with Silas Blackwood, and winter had settled over Cripple Creek with a vengeance. The mountain passes were now treacherous with ice, effectively cutting the town off from the outside world until spring. In the small room above her seamstress shop, Elena worked by lamplight, her fingers moving with practiced precision as she hemmed a dress for the banker's wife. But her mind wasn't on the delicate stitchwork. Spread across her small table, hidden beneath bolts of fabric when customers arrived, were detailed sketches of mining claims, property deeds she had carefully copied from public records, and newspaper clippings about suspicious accidents that had befallen various ranchers over the past 5 years. All roads led back to Blackwood Mining and Development Company. A sharp knock at her shop door made her quickly cover the papers. Through the frosted window, she could see the imposing figure of Blackwood himself, his black coat dusted with snow. Miss Moreau, his voice carried through the door. Might I have a word? Elena smoothed her hair and opened the door, the cold mountain air rushing in. Mr. Blackwood, this is unexpected. I was passing by and noticed your light still burning. It's past 9 o'clock, you work very late hours. She stepped aside reluctantly, allowing him to enter. The small shop suddenly felt even smaller with his commanding presence filling the space. His eyes took in every detail. The neat rows of thread, the half-finished dresses hanging on forms, the small living area visible through the doorway to the back room. Hard work is necessary for success, non? She moved to block his view of the table where her research lay hidden. Was there something you needed, Mr. Blackwood? Actually, yes. He removed his hat, revealing hair dampened by melting snow. I've been thinking about your situation here. A woman alone working all hours to make ends meet, it concerns me. Elena's pulse quickened, though she kept her voice steady. I manage quite well, thank you. Do you? Blackwood moved closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with tobacco. Because I've been making some inquiries. Your rent is 3 months behind, Miss Moreau. Your supplier in Denver is demanding payment for the last shipment of fabric, and Mrs. Patterson cancelled her order for the Christmas dress because she heard rumors. What kind of rumors? The words came out sharper than she intended. Blackwood's smile was predatory. Oh, nothing specific. Just whispers about mysterious women who appear from nowhere, who claim to be one thing but might be another entirely. People in mining towns are suspicious by nature, you understand. They've seen too many confidence games, too many pretty faces hiding dark intentions. Elena felt the trap closing around her, but forced herself to remain calm. I've done nothing wrong. The people who know my work, they are satisfied. I'm sure they are. But you see, in a place like this, reputation is everything. A word here, a suggestion there. He shrugged eloquently. Business can dry up very quickly. And I suppose you have nothing to do with these whispers? Me? Blackwood placed his hand over his heart in mock offense. Miss Moreau, you wound me. I would never deliberately harm a lady's reputation, but I also can't control what people choose to believe. Elena turned away, moving to the window that looked out onto the snow-covered street. The town looked peaceful in the moonlight, but she could feel the menace in Blackwood's presence like a physical weight. What do you want? I want to help you. His voice was suddenly gentle, almost caring. You're struggling, Elena. May I call you Elena? You're proud, I admire that. But pride doesn't pay debts or put food on the table. She faced him again, reading the calculation behind his concerned expression. And your help, it comes with what price? Companionship, nothing more. He spread his hands innocently. I'm a lonely man, Elena. I have wealth, power, everything a man could want except someone to share it with. Someone intelligent, refined, beautiful. His eyes burned into hers. Someone like you. I've already told you. That was before your circumstances became so pressing. Blackwood moved to her work table, his fingers trailing along the edge where her research lay hidden. "Let me be frank. I can solve all your problems with a word. Your debts, your reputation, your future security. All I ask in return is your company. Dinner occasionally. Perhaps the theater when the traveling shows come through. Escort me to social functions. Nothing that would compromise your virtue, I assure you." Elena's mind raced. She needed to stay in Cripple Creek, needed to continue gathering evidence against him, but she also sensed that refusal was no longer truly an option. Blackwood had maneuvered her into a corner as skillfully as a chess master. "And if I refuse?" His smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened. "Then I'm afraid you'll find life in Cripple Creek very difficult indeed. The mining business is dangerous, Elena. Accidents happen. Sometimes they happen to people who refuse reasonable offers of friendship." The threat was veiled but unmistakable. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain cold. I need time to think." "Of course." Blackwood replaced his hat and moved toward the door. "But don't take too long. Winter is harsh in the mountains, and a woman alone, well, many things can go wrong." He paused at the threshold. "I'll expect your answer by Sunday. We can discuss the details over dinner at my estate." After he left, Elena sank into her chair, her hands trembling as she uncovered her research. She picked up a faded newspaper clipping about a rancher named Miguel Sandoval, found dead in what appeared to be a mining accident. Her father. "Soon, Papa," she whispered in Spanish, her careful French accent dropping away entirely. "Soon he will pay for what he did to you, to our family, to our land. But first, she would have to survive becoming prey to the very predator she had come to destroy." Sunday evening arrived with a howling blizzard that turned the world outside Elena's window into a swirling wall of white. She stood before her small mirror, adjusting the deep blue silk dress she had sewn for herself, the finest fabric she owned, saved for an occasion she had hoped would never come. Her hands shook slightly as she pinned up her dark hair, leaving a few tendrils to frame her face. The knock at her door came precisely at 7, followed by Blackwood's voice cutting through the wind. "Elena, my carriage is waiting." She opened the door to find him impeccably dressed in a black evening suit, snowflakes clinging to his expensive overcoat. Behind him, a covered carriage waited in the street, its brass fittings gleaming despite the storm. "You look magnificent," he said, his eyes drinking in every detail of her appearance. "Though I confess I'm surprised you decided to accept my invitation. Did I have a choice?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Blackwood's smile was sharp as a blade. "We always have choices, my dear. It's simply a matter of which consequences we're willing to accept." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The ride to Blackwood's estate took 20 minutes through the winding mountain roads. Elena sat in tense silence, acutely aware of his presence beside her in the confined space of the carriage. Through the small window, she glimpsed the lights of his mansion growing larger, a sprawling Victorian structure that seemed to emerge from the mountainside like something from a Gothic novel. "Welcome to Ravenshollow," Blackwood said, as they pulled up to the circular drive. "I had it built 5 years ago, brought the architects all the way from San Francisco." The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers imported from Europe, and oil paintings that probably cost more than most people in Cripple Creek would see in a lifetime. A Mexican woman in a simple black dress and white apron appeared to take Elena's cloak. "This is Consuela," Blackwood said casually. "She's been with me since I acquired the property. Excellent cook, though she speaks very little English. Don't you, Consuela?" The woman's dark eyes met Elena's briefly, and something passed between them, a flash of recognition perhaps, or shared understanding. "Si, señor," Consuela murmured, her gaze quickly dropping. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 20, though only 2 places were set at one end of the massive mahogany table. Blackwood was the perfect host, keeping the conversation light as they dined on roasted duck and wine that he claimed came from his private vineyard in California. But Elena could feel his eyes on her constantly, studying her reactions, measuring her responses. "You seem nervous," he observed as Consuela cleared the main course. "Surely you don't find my company so intimidating." "I find your intentions unclear, Mr. Blackwood." Elena set down her wineglass, having barely touched it. She needed her wits about her tonight. "My intentions are quite simple." He leaned back in his chair, swirling the dark red wine in his glass. "I want you, Elena. I've wanted you since the moment you walked into my office. You're unlike any woman I've ever encountered. Educated, refined, mysterious. You intrigue me in ways I find unsettling. And what you want You take? Usually, yes. His honesty was brutal, but with you I find myself wanting more than mere possession. I want your willing companionship, your conversation, your affection perhaps in time. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. And if I cannot give you these things? Blackwood was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. Do you know how I built my fortune, Elena? I started with nothing, the son of a failed farmer from Kansas, but I had something others lacked, the ability to see opportunity where others saw only obstacles, and the will to do whatever was necessary to seize that opportunity. He rose from his chair and moved to the window, gazing out at the storm. This land we're sitting on, for instance, it belonged to a Mexican rancher named Sandoval, stubborn old man who refused to sell, even when I offered him twice what his property was worth, said it had been in his family for generations, that he would die before giving it up to an Anglo. Eleanor's blood turned to ice, but she forced herself to remain perfectly still. Unfortunately, Blackwood continued, his voice conversational, he did exactly that. Died in a mining accident. Very tragic. His family couldn't pay the debts he'd accumulated, so the property went up for auction. I was the only bidder, naturally. Naturally, Elena managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Blackwood turned back to her, and for a moment his mask slipped entirely, revealing the cold predator beneath. The point, my dear, is that I have always gotten what I wanted, one way or another. But with you, he moved closer, his hand reaching out to touch her cheek. With you I find myself hoping there might be another way. Elena forced herself not to flinch from his touch. What are you asking of me? Marry me. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? Marry me, Elena. Be my wife, my partner, my equal. I'll give you everything, wealth, position, security. All I ask is that you give me yourself in return. His thumb traced along her jawline. Think of what we could build together. I have the power. You have the refinement. We could rule this territory like a king and queen. Elena's mind reeled. Marriage to Blackwood would put her in the perfect position to gather evidence against him, to access his private papers, to learn the full extent of his crimes. But it would also trap her in an intimacy with her father's killer that made her stomach turn. This is very sudden, Mr. Blackwood. Silas, he corrected. And yes, it is sudden, but I'm not a young man, Elena, and I've learned not to waste time when I find something I truly want. His hand moved to her wrist, his fingers closing around it like a shackle. What do you say? Outside, the wind howled like the voices of the dead, and Elena thought of her father's blood soaking into the mountain soil. She thought of the evidence she needed, the justice that had been denied, the chance for revenge that was now being offered to her on a silver platter. Yes, she whispered, I will marry you, Silas. His smile was triumphant as he pulled her to her feet and into his arms. You've made me the happiest man alive, my darling. His lips found hers in a kiss that tasted of wine and victory. As he held her, Elena closed her eyes and silently repeated the vow she had made over her father's grave. Silas Blackwood would pay for his crimes, even if it meant sacrificing herself in the process. The wedding took place 3 weeks later, in the First Presbyterian Church of Cripple Creek, on a crisp February morning when the snow lay thick and pristine across the mountain peaks. Elena stood at the altar in a gown of ivory silk that had cost more than most miners earned in a year, watching Silas Blackwood's face as he spoke his vows with apparent sincerity. The church was packed with Cripple Creek's elite, mine owners, bankers, merchants, and their wives, all eager to witness their most powerful citizen claim his mysterious bride. Elena could feel their curious stares, hear their whispered speculations about the foreign seamstress who had captured the gold baron's heart. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister intoned. You may kiss the bride. Silas lifted her veil with reverent hands, his grey eyes holding something that might have been genuine tenderness. Mrs. Blackwood, he murmured, before claiming her lips in a kiss that sealed her fate. The reception at Raven's Hollow was a lavish affair, with champagne flowing like water, and a 5-course dinner served on china that bore the Blackwood family crest. Eleanor played the role of blushing bride perfectly, accepting congratulations and well wishes from people who had no idea they were celebrating her entry into the enemy's stronghold. As the evening wore on and the guests finally departed, Eleanor found herself alone with her new husband in the opulent master bedroom. Silas had changed from his formal wedding attire into a burgundy silk dressing gown, and he moved about the room with the casual confidence of a man who had gotten exactly what he wanted. "Nervous?" he asked, noticing her stillness by the tall windows that overlooked the valley. "Perhaps a little," Elena admitted, her French accent perfectly maintained despite her racing heart. "There's nothing to fear, my dear. I'm not a brute, despite what some might say about my business practices." He moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "I want tonight to be perfect for you." Elena closed her eyes, gathering her courage for what she had to do. When she opened them again, her reflection in the window glass showed a woman transformed. No longer the demure seamstress, but someone harder, more dangerous. "Silas," she said quietly, not turning around, "there is something I must tell you." "What is it, darling?" She reached into her reticule and withdrew a folded paper, a daguerreotype photograph, yellowed with age. "Do you recognize this man?" Silas took the photograph, studying it in the lamplight. It showed a dignified Mexican gentleman in his 50s, standing proudly beside a beautiful Spanish colonial ranch house. His confusion was evident. "I'm afraid I don't. Should I?" His name was Miguel Sandoval. Elena finally turned to face him, and Silas stepped back at the cold fury blazing in her dark eyes. "He was my father." The photograph slipped from Silas's fingers, fluttering to the Persian carpet. "Your father? But you said you were French." "I lied." Elena's accent vanished entirely, replaced by the crisp English of an educated woman, with just the faintest trace of Spanish inflection. "My name is not Elena Moreau. It is Maria Elena Sandoval, and I am the daughter of the man you murdered for this land." Silas went very still, his hand moving instinctively toward the drawer where Elena knew he kept a small pistol. "That's impossible. Sandoval died in a mining accident. An accident you arranged." Elena pulled a sheaf of papers from her reticule, copies of documents she had painstakingly gathered over months of investigation. "I have the records, Silas. The forged mining claims, the bribed officials, the testimony from the man you paid to weaken the support beams in that mine shaft." She scattered the papers at his feet, like accusations given form. "My father trusted you. When you first came to him with your offer to buy the ranch, he treated you with courtesy, offered you hospitality. He had no idea you were already scheming to take everything from him." Silas's face had gone pale, but his voice remained steady. "Even if that were true, and I'm not admitting it is, what did you hope to accomplish with this charade? You're my wife now, Elena. Whatever grievances you think you have against me, think I have." Elena's laugh was bitter as winter wind. "You destroyed my family, Silas. My father is dead. My younger brother died of fever 2 years later because we couldn't afford proper medical care after you stole our land. My mother lasted barely a year after that, before grief consumed her entirely." She moved closer, her eyes burning with 5 years of accumulated rage. "I came here with one purpose, to see you pay for what you did, to gather enough evidence to see you hanged for murder. And yet you married me." Silas's shock was giving way to something else, a dangerous calculation. "Why would you put yourself in my power if you truly believed I was capable of murder?" "Because I needed access to your private papers, your safe, your business correspondence." Elena gestured around the opulent bedroom. "What better position than as your loving wife?" Silas was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if seeing her for the first time. When he finally spoke, his voice held a note of genuine admiration. "Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. You're even more extraordinary than I thought." The response caught Elena off guard. "What? Don't you see, my dear? You're magnificent." Silas moved closer, seemingly unbothered by her revelations. "The planning, the deception, the sheer audacity of it all. You've spent months becoming the perfect bait for your trap, and I walked right into it." His hand reached out to touch her cheek. "I've never encountered anyone like you." Elena jerked away from his touch. "You're not angry, afraid?" "Afraid?" Silas laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "My darling Elena, or Maria if you prefer, you've just proven that you're worthy of me in ways I never imagined. You have the intelligence to plan this elaborate revenge, the courage to see it through, and the ruthlessness to marry your enemy to achieve your goals." His eyes gleamed with something that might have been love or madness. "You're perfect." Elena stared at him in horror. This wasn't the reaction she had expected. Fear, yes, anger, certainly, but not this twisted admiration, this perverse pride in her deception. "You're insane," she whispered. "Perhaps." Silas moved to his desk, opening the drawer where Elena knew he kept his pistol. Instead, he withdrew a small key. "But I'm also practical. You want to see me pay for my crimes? Very well." He walked to a painting on the far wall, a pastoral scene that concealed a wall safe. "The evidence you seek is in here. Every document, every bribed official, every questionable death, including the detailed plans I made for your father's accident. Eleanor's breath caught. Why would you keep such things? Insurance, power, the ability to ensure loyalty through fear. He turned the key in the safe's lock. But also pride, I suppose. I've built an empire through cunning and ruthlessness, and I wanted a record of my achievements, even the ones the world could never know about. The safe door swung open, revealing stacks of papers, ledgers, and what appeared to be photographs. Silas gestured toward it like a host offering refreshments. There it is, my dear. Everything you need to destroy me. The question is, what will you do with it now that you have it? Elena stared at the open safe, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain Silas could hear it. Inside were neat stacks of documents, ledgers bound in leather, and daguerreotype photographs that made her stomach turn. Even from where she stood, she could see the top document bore her father's name. This is a trick, she said, her voice hoarse. Some kind of trap. No trick. Silas moved to pour himself a brandy from the crystal decanter on his nightstand, his movements casual, as if they were discussing the weather. I told you, Elena. I admire what you've accomplished. Few people have ever outmaneuvered me so completely. Then you're giving me everything I need to see you hanged. I'm giving you a choice. Silas settled into a leather armchair, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. You can take those documents to the territorial marshal. Present your evidence. Watch me stand trial for murder and fraud. I'll undoubtedly hang and you'll have your revenge. Eleanor took a step toward the safe, then stopped. What's the alternative? Silas's smile was enigmatic. Stay. Be my wife in truth. Help me build something greater than either of us could achieve alone. He gestured around the opulent room. You've proven you have the intelligence and ruthlessness to be my equal partner. Together we could control not just Cripple Creek, but the entire Colorado territory. You're asking me to forget what you did to my family. I'm asking you to look toward the future instead of the past. Silas leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. Your father is dead, Eleanor. Your mother and brother are dead. Nothing you do tonight will bring them back. But you're alive, and you have a choice about what kind of life you want to live. Eleanor moved closer to the safe, her hands trembling as she reached for the top document. It was a contract in her father's careful handwriting, agreeing to sell water rights to Blackwood Mining, a contract she knew her father had refused to sign. The signature at the bottom was clearly forged. How many others? She whispered. How many families have you destroyed? Does it matter? Silas's voice held no remorse. The weak are always prey to the strong, Elena. That's the law of nature, the law of the frontier. I simply understood that truth better than most. She pulled out more documents, death certificates, mining claims, property deeds. Each one represented a life ruined, a family destroyed by Silas Blackwood's insatiable greed. Her fingers found a photograph that made her gasp. Her father's body being pulled from the collapsed mine shaft, his face peaceful in death. You kept this, she said, her voice breaking. You kept a picture of what you did to him. I keep records of all my transactions. Silas rose from his chair, moving toward her with predatory grace. Your father was just another obstacle to be removed. But you, Elena, you're something far more valuable. You're a worthy opponent who could become a perfect ally. Elena clutched the photograph to her chest, tears streaming down her face. He was a good man. He never hurt anyone. He was in my way. Silas reached out to touch her hair, his voice surprisingly gentle. I understand your pain, truly I do. But pain can be transformed into power if you're strong enough. Let me show you how. For a moment, Elena wavered. The evidence in her hands was damning enough to destroy Silas completely, but she was also acutely aware that she was alone with him in his stronghold, miles from town, surrounded by his loyal servants. Even if she tried to leave with the documents, would she make it alive? What guarantee do I have? She asked. How do I know you won't simply kill me once I've served your purpose? Silas laughed, the sound holding genuine warmth. Because you're the only person who's ever matched my intelligence, my cunning, my absolute determination to win at any cost. You're not my victim, Eleanor. You're my equal. And I need an equal, far more than I need another corpse. He moved to his desk, pulling out a sheet of paper and a pen. Here's my guarantee. He began writing quickly, his handwriting bold and confident. A full confession to the murder of Miguel Sandoval and 6 other men whose deaths I orchestrated. Signed, dated, and witnessed. He signed his name with a flourish and held it out to her. Take this. Hide it. If anything happens to you, if you die under suspicious circumstances, If you disappear mysteriously, you can arrange for this confession to be delivered to the authorities posthumously." Elena stared at the paper in disbelief. "You're signing your own death warrant." "I'm ensuring our mutual survival," Silas smiled. "You see, my dear, I've just made it impossible for me to betray you without destroying myself. And you've already proven you're intelligent enough to arrange insurance of your own." The confession felt surreal in Elena's hands, her father's murderer casually admitting to his crimes as if discussing a business transaction. The rational part of her mind screamed that she should take the evidence and run, expose Silas to the world and watch him hang for his crimes. But another part of her, a part that terrified her with its cold calculation, recognized the opportunity he was offering. As Silas Blackwood's wife and partner, she would have power beyond anything she could achieve as a seamstress seeking justice. She could protect other families from suffering her father's fate. She could use Silas's own methods against him, gradually taking control of his empire from within. "If I stay," she said slowly, "things change. I'm not your decorative wife or your kept woman. I'm your partner in everything." "Everything," Silas agreed. "Business decisions, financial planning, future acquisitions. You'll have access to all of it. And if I discover you're planning to harm other innocent families, then you have the power to stop me, or better yet, find more efficient solutions." His eyes gleamed with appreciation. "You see, Elena, I've never had a conscience, but perhaps I can borrow yours if it comes attached to a mind as sharp as your own." Elena looked once more at the photograph of her father, then carefully placed it back in the safe, along with the other documents. But she kept Silas's signed confession, folding it carefully and placing it in her bodice. "Very well," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was choosing. "But understand this, Silas. I will never forgive you for what you did to my family. I will stay because I see the opportunity to prevent others from suffering the same fate. But I will never love you." Silas moved closer, his hand reaching out to cup her face with surprising tenderness. "Love is overrated, my dear. Respect, partnership, mutual benefit, these are far more reliable foundations for a marriage." He leaned down to kiss her forehead gently. "Besides, you may surprise yourself. After all, we're more alike than you care to admit." As if summoned by his words, a soft knock came at the door. "Senor Blackwood?" Consuela's voice was carefully neutral. "Is everything well?" "Perfectly well, Consuela," Silas called back. "My wife and I were just getting acquainted." Elena caught the subtle emphasis on wife and realized that Consuela had been listening, probably ready to help dispose of a body if necessary. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she felt a strange sense of belonging. This was her world now, a place where survival depended on cunning, where power was the only currency that mattered, where the strong devoured the weak without conscience or consequence. Her father would be horrified by the choice she was making, but her father was dead, and she was alive, and she had just gained access to more power than she had ever dreamed possible. As Silas led her toward the massive four-poster bed, Elena silently promised her father's memory that she would use this power wisely. She would be the conscience Silas lacked, the protection for the innocent he threatened. She would become the monster necessary to fight monsters, and perhaps in time she would find a way to destroy Silas Blackwood from within his own empire, not as his victim, but as his equal and ultimate successor. Outside, the mountain wind howled through the peaks like the voices of the dead, carrying with it the promise of a harsh but profitable spring.